All right, welcome everybody. For those of you that are listening in live, happy Saturday to you. I hope you've got your training in for the day and you're ready to relax and soak up some education. My name is Doug Katona. I've been a trainer, coach, athlete, executive on both sides of the fence in the industry, both on the manufacturing side for American Barbell, and I was a former COO of World Gym International. But maybe more importantly, I think I bring a very unique blend of strength and conditioning, exercise science, and it never has escaped me. Um, I started out as a trainer back in the late 80s, owned some gyms, sleep in the back of my group exercise room, and always competed as an athlete. And I always found that there was missing ingredients in programming for people. And if you know the fitness industry now, two of the most popular trends are programming and technology. And of those two, programming is most likely the most confusing, yet it has the highest value. So this session is more about strength and speed and how it relates to fitness programming. From an athletic standpoint, when we do a lot of athletes at the NFL Combine, and we have very high-end athletes that we coach, and we have very mid-range athletes, and then we have the general fitness enthusiast. But what you're going to find is there's a common theme among good trainers and good coaches. They all understand how to program. I've been doing it for about 30 years, and it's the not so sexy part of the job if you're a trainer or a coach, or you're programming for yourself. But if you spend a little bit of time in it, that's where you see the good stuff and the results. So we're going to talk a lot about that throughout the course of this session. I know I did a webinar about 2 weeks ago, and I offered people, I said, hey, if you want to get your movement analyzed, send me a video, and you'll get my email at the end. And I think 50% of the attendees were already sending me their squat, press, and deadlift video, and everybody's eyes were opening up. So I just want to give you a little bit of real world strength and conditioning athletic with a fitness bias to understanding how to program for strength and speed. So you're going to like this one. We're going to move kind of quick, but know that it's only about 7 slides, but each slide is going to be power packed full of information. What you're going to find is I don't read my slides a lot, but I try to give you a little bit of that gray area professionally on things that you may not know. As I've gone through my career, I've been successful doing the opposite of what everybody does. And I'll explain more about that as we go through. So, why have people been wanting me to talk about speed and strength? Why are they important? A lot of people in programming don't understand how to mix those two things together. They're probably the two most important variables in programming. So I want all of you to think about what you do on a weekly basis for training or exercise or fitness, whatever your program is. So if you think about that, how many days a week? What are your modalities? What kind of movements are you doing? What are the intensities? I have a couple of questions for you. Do you know why you're doing those programs? Are all of the movements and exercises you're doing actually augmenting what you're trying to accomplish? And what we're finding now, the fitness industry has really shifted. There's a more mature audience that are wanting people to understand how to program. We do a lot of work with New York Sports Club, for example, and they feed a lot of programs into Trainerize. And what we're finding is people actually want to be programmed, but there's not enough trainers and coaches that understand. And so part of my role today is to give you some really good secret sauce stuff and some hacks that are going to allow you to accelerate way past anybody else in the art of programming. And I think for most of you, I want you to have a little bit of selfish time during this session, right? Over the next 40 minutes, think about what you're doing for your own training, because I can't see all of you, but if I asked you, I said, raise your hand if you're okay where you're at in your fitness program or your health spectrum. I don't think anybody would say, yeah, I'm fine. I don't want to get more fit. I don't want to get more lean. I don't want to get faster, right? And age does not matter. Age does not matter. And what we're finding with speed and strength is a lot of people are just trying to preserve or reclaim some athleticism. Would a lot of you agree that when you were younger, and it may not have been that long ago for some of you, that you were a pretty good athlete, or you could run, you could change direction, You could jump, you could leap, your reaction time was better. That's true functional training. I think I give a lot of lectures and seminars, and I do a lot of live sessions, which I always prefer. But when I ask the question of fitness professionals, I say, can you define functional training for me? And everybody kind of looks around, and I get a different answer from everybody. But what we're going to talk about today is the real functional training. I mean, isn't all training functional? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I also listed on this last check mark hormones, happiness, and health. I think a lot of people underestimate the value of having adequate speed and strength in their programs. That's what a lot of people are starting to realize now. And again, I've been doing this for 20, 25 years. And I still train every day. I'm in Texas currently. So I have my home in Texas has beautiful garage gym, but that's where I'm at all the time. And so I'm actually practicing and believing and doing what I'm about to share with you. And we have so many athletes of so many different ages. So this presentation is also it's an amalgamation of what we've been seeing and hearing from everybody that's trying to get programmed properly. And so this is a nice little roadmap on what's missing in programming. And again, if you lean into programming, it takes a little bit of study, a little bit of research. But if you get this right, this little roadmap here, we're just going to follow it real quick. And there's one on here. So if you look at each of these 7 different pieces here, there's one here that's terribly misunderstood and probably not used enough in programming. See if you can figure it out when you're looking at it as I talk about it. So obviously speed. Would you agree that most people that go into the gym don't move fast enough? And I'm not just talking about doing cardiovascular work. I'm talking about actually lifting weight. We're going to get into that. You're going to hear me say something today that if I'm coaching you, I can get anybody to lift heavy. That's not hard. But can you lift heavy and fast? That has true functional application. Or better yet, I want you to be able to transfer that out to a skill. If you're really fit and you're training in the gym, the result should be that you should go out and do something that you really enjoy doing with your family or your friends, or you can compete, pickleball, surfing, tennis, whatever it is, and do it extremely well. So that's kind of the idea behind this. It's an athletic way to look at how you're programming your fitness program. And then I put on here compound movements. There's a lot of people that walk into facilities, strength and conditioning or gyms, and they do a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of movements that really mean something, meaning if you're doing lateral raises or you're doing a tricep push down or you're doing a bent over row, those are all fabulous exercises as accessory pieces. We want you to focus on compound movements. And I put focus on the big 3, which is squat, press, and deadlift. And we'll get into that a little bit. The other thing I put on here is lifting with sufficient loads. You know, I'm always going to tell the truth when it comes to programming and fitness. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to get strong, if you want to extend your life, have better hormone balance, coordination, you've got to be able to lift heavy. So some people are a little bit afraid of that. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some skills on how to cope with that, whether you're training yourself or somebody else. I already mentioned being athletic. We really believe that people should be moving athletically. I talk a lot about fitness and we talk a lot about sports, right? 2 different groups. If we're getting athletes ready for the NFL Combine, or we have a local athlete here in Texas, Dariana, if you're listening, hello. She just went to the Combine to try out for the USA bobsled and skeleton team. And we did a lot of not just north and south movement, but also east and west. So think about that. A lot of people in the gym are moving on a treadmill or they're lifting in one plane. We want people to move laterally a lot and also vertically. Okay. So this is really important as we move forward. So the other thing is the posterior chain. So a lot of people are looking in the mirror and those are the muscles that they're working. I want you to work on the muscles that you can't see when you look in the mirror. Those are the muscles that are going to benefit you the most as you move forward, not just for proper programming, but to get stronger, to get faster. And so we're going to talk a lot about that over the course of the next 30 minutes or so. The next one is grip, and the last one is protein. I only put that protein on there because what we're finding is, and you probably would agree, not enough people get enough high quality protein. And if we do all those other 6 things before we get to the protein, but we don't have the protein, then we don't recover as properly, because if you're doing things right, you're going to be working hard and you're going to feel that. And proper, adequate levels of protein are actually going to help you recover. So the one thing that I want to talk about is that grip strength. And that's the missing highest variable that I want you to focus on. Static strength doesn't change until around age 65 or 70. If you've been training on a regular basis, you should be able to pick up and carry heavy things. Isn't that functional? Right? So your program needs to involve heavy grip and heavy carry. And we'll address that once I give you some of those little tips and hints once you get to the programming piece. Okay. I asked you to think about your program on a weekly basis. I didn't say monthly. I didn't say every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks. There's a lot of programs that will schedule people out for 4 weeks or blocks or mesocycles. But the last time we checked, life happens. I don't know how many of you have kids or jobs. I don't think anybody gets to work out 2 times a day and take a nap and get a massage and do all that. Wouldn't that be great? But life gets in the way. So if you're a trainer or a coach and you're programming for somebody, it's a little bit more work to program on a weekly basis. But why do I only want to program on a weekly basis? And this includes for yourself too. Things change. We just discussed that. But you also have to be ready to call an audible and pivot on the movements that you're doing based upon how you're feeling. If you're lifting really heavy or really fast, you might be sore a little bit longer. So these are all real world things that I want you to think about. And is your program really addressing what you're bad at? A good coach or a good trainer will actually, if they're good, expose weakness. They're not going to play to your strengths. So how many people would you see training and they like to bench press and they like to do a bicep curl, or they like to run or do cardio, but that's what they do. But they're not really addressing what they're bad at, right? And those are the things that are going to that's what's going to come back and bite you later on. And again, when you look at your programming during the week and people go, oh, how do you train 6 or 7 days a week and you're busy? And I said, well, there's 24 hours in a day. There's 168 hours in a week. Surely you can find some time to get 7 or 8 hours or 9 hours in of high quality training. The good news about what we're talking about today, if you focused on those compound movements, if you focus on some intensity, you can actually spend less time. And so I'll address what that looks like in programming cycle. I also put a couple of nice little check marks here that I do want to touch on. Physiologically, when you train hard, you lift heavy enough, and you're going to do what we're going to talk about today. There's also some psychological benefits, right? People tend to feel better. Their energy's better throughout the day. One of the first questions we ask people is, how's your energy throughout the day? If you're feeling like you're tired midday, if you're feeling like you can't wait to go to sleep, but you're tired in the morning, we like to look and see what's going on, not just with nutrition and sleep and lifestyle, but let's look at that training program, right? So there's a psychological and a physiological component of how you, or if you're coaching somebody, how you should assess what that athlete or that member or yourself, how are you feeling? I want you feeling great from the time you wake up at 5 a.m. till the time you go to bed at 9 p.m. And that's a really good litmus test to see if your programming is actually working. Then, of course, the last thing is, it's a thing with me, rate of aging and performance. I'm in my late 50s and I feel just as good as I did in my late 20s. And I feel like the strength and conditioning and the speed work has preserved a lot of my athleticism, and I feel good, right? You got to triage your body a little bit more, but don't throw the age factor in there. I would really rather hear you say, well, I don't know how to do movements, or I'm new to exercise, or I'd like to get back into whatever the sport is that you did when you were younger, whatever's going to make you happy. Everybody's going to start at the same point. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how conditioned you are. If you follow what we're going to talk about here, you're going to be in really good shape moving forward. Okay. This is a simple hierarchy to remember. And again, I shared that I've had a pretty good career by doing the things opposite of what most coaches and trainers do. A lot of runners, if any of you run, or a lot of endurance athletes, They think to get better, or they think if they want to run better or get into marathoning or distance running, they start distance running. But what ends up happening with that? They start with volume, but they don't understand what to program their run distances and intensities. They get injured because their skill and their technique is not good. I'd like to see you do the opposite. Skill and technique should come first. If you're moving efficiently and effectively, you're going to diminish or reduce your susceptibility to injury, but a lot of people kind of throw that out the window, right? So if we're coaching people in our seminars, when we see athletes, fitness, it doesn't matter. Everybody starts again at the same point. We want to see people squat, press, and move. And that's going to tell us a lot about where they begin. So movement efficiency is everything. It's, again, lifting heavy is not going to hurt you. I always tell trainers, lift heavy weight doesn't hurt people. People hurt people. So if you understand the laws of physics, if you understand how to move with efficient lines, if you understand where the general center of mass is of your body, if you understand how to work with a barbell, how to work with load, you're going to reduce your susceptibility of injury. Some people can get hurt on a 65-pound deadlift just as much as they can on a 365-pound deadlift. If your form and your technique are good, and if I put 1,000 pounds on the bar, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is that you just can't lift it off the ground. If your technique is not good, you could get hurt on that 65-pound deadlift. So again, skill and technique reign supreme. And this is a huge area of opportunity if you're a personal trainer. Focus on skill and technique, because this is what's not being taught in facilities across the country that I walk into. Obviously, intensity is really important. Again, speed comes first, and then load after that. When I say load, I mean adding weight, and then volume, of course. So the good news on this is if you wanted to be a faster runner, you would start shorter distances, 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, 800 meters, a mile. Make sure your skill and your technique is good as you ramp up intensity, and that's what's going to allow you to excel over time. You know, most, if not all, last time I checked, about a year and a half ago, it was all, but all the world records in running have always been broken by runners that went from a short distance, extrapolated out to longer distances. So hierarchy, if you're coaching, teaching people, those are the three you can hang your hat on. If you're programming for yourself, I would do the same thing and say, look, am I doing too much? Am I not seeing results? Some people do more than they think they should, and they think that's what's going to give them the results. But most people, as you add on volume, you slow down in what you're doing. I'd rather have you shorten it and speed up and lift heavier. So we're going to start jumping into a little bit more of a granular programming prescription here. We're about 20 minutes in. We've got about 15 more minutes or so to go, and then we probably will have some questions. So again, I'm not concerned about how heavy you can lift. I'll get you there. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're strong or not strong. We can get you heavier and stronger. But there's two really important ingredients here. Max effort days and dynamic effort days. This is really simple to remember. Most of you probably run in the middle, or most people that we see in gyms run in the middle. They actually spend most of their time not doing the important days. They spend this mid-level type of intensity and volume, 70%, 80% of RPE. Same thing on heart rate if you were doing some sort of stamina-based work. Max effort days are really important, but they're not so pleasant. Those would be lifting heavy for 1 rep, 3 rep, 5 rep, and 10 reps. And yes, there's a lot of other combinations here. I'm trying to keep it really simple, but if you just focused on this, you'll be pretty successful. That means that each one of those reps is heavy. It means if you're deadlifting or squatting, that doesn't mean that the first 3 of your set of 5 reps is simple. That means every rep of the 5 is heavy. So those heavy days, good news, don't have to happen all the time. So we'd like to see people hit heavy, heavy RMs, meaning you're seeing 2 white lights on that last rep, but we'd like to see that 1 or 2 days a month maximum, depending upon who you are. But days should be heavy. And there is recent science showing that at around 80% of 1 RM or better is where we're seeing the most gains, both from a strength perspective and from a physiological perspective. Now, the second one here is my favorite. This is what I think is missing the most out of the most programs. So again, let's go back to your program, what you're doing during the week. A lot of people are doing these rep ranges 5 to 15 reps. But are you also taking the time during the week, probably 2 days a week, depending upon what your skill set is, to actually move the load fast? So take the deadlift, for example. A dynamic effort day, that just means speed. Each repetition should be done in less than 1 second. It's very fast. And note that we listed 60 to 68% of your one rep maximum. The good news about mixing in max effort days and dynamic effort days is that these days should be done doing one movement at a time. That's called a monostructural movement. That'd be a squat, a press, a deadlift. That could be a seated row. That could be a one arm row. That could be a good morning. There's a lot of movements. That could be a weighted pull up. So there's a lot of things here. And look, if you did one or two times of max effort and some dynamic effort, that's going to take care of a lot of the strength component of what you do during the week. I did put a little shout out here to Westside Barbell. A lot of you, if you're in the strength and conditioning game, may know of the late Louis Simmons. That's where I learned a lot of programming. He was really the pioneer in programming. He has some, and the books are still relevant today. He created something called the conjugate method. And the conjugate method is really what we just discussed, is a max effort and a dynamic effort day. So he usually would, and again, the good news is you're doing one movement at a time. But again, if you're doing a heavy max effort day, and if it's a 7 sets of one deadlift, that's probably all you're doing that day, right? So great book, Conjugate Method. He also has a squat press deadlift manual, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So uh, the next thing I wanted to talk about, this is one that when I show the fitness industry, creates probably the most dialogue and discussion. I'm actually headed out to Kalispell, Montana on Monday to talk with some of the most successful gym owners in the fitness industry. And I'm going to use this slide because everybody's trying to figure out why nobody's personal training numbers are doing very well. But there's more personal trainers than ever in the industry. There's more people following programming than ever. And a lot of it's because trainers and coaches, and maybe some of you that are programming yourself, are stuck in doing things the way we did them 15 or 20 years ago and not recognizing what I would call where the good stuff is. And so again, the big three come first, right? Make sure you're proficient at deadlift, squat, and press. And this is something, check yourself on some of these things. And I'm not going to read every single one, but I'm going to point out a couple of things for you here. Um, that excessive stretching right there, that always becomes a question. When we do live seminars and we're talking about lifting a little bit heavier, and people always say, well, what kind of stretching do you recommend? And then they're shocked when we say we don't recommend a lot of stretching. We recommend time under tension. So if you are an athlete and you spend time under tension, I like an Olympic lifter. Olympic lifters don't do a lot of stretching. The heavier you squat, that's going to be better for the integrity of your tendons and your ligaments and your joints. That's what's going to create that flexibility. So we talk a lot about that. So that one is one call out there. The other thing I would say is random recovery periods. Part of good programming, if you're programming for somebody or yourself, is programming for recovery. So there's actually opportunities in your program that you should be resting 3 to 5 minutes. There's other opportunities in your programming where you shouldn't be resting very long at all. There's other times where we're going to say rest to recover, which means we're going to leave it to you to tell us when you're going to move on to the next piece in the program. We actually have about 10 different definitions of recovery, but the point here is random recovery doesn't work if based upon load and intensity and your skill and your technique, that recovery period is really important. And then the last one I want to call out here is just above that. I think a lot of people are confused what to do during a warm up. I think I see a lot of people jump on a piece of cardiovascular equipment, maybe do a little bit of foam rolling, and then they start moving into the program, but the warm up doesn't reflect the intent of what the actual program is. What we like to see is a warm up that's very athletic. We like to see some lateral movement, vertical movement. We'd like to see some jump ropes, some squatting, and it could be even a PVC pipe to practice an overhead squat. And then as that warm up goes on over 5, 8, or 10 minutes, depending upon the intensity of the day, that warm up gets more intense. And it should be multi movement. So if there's a really good safe rule of thumb here is mix in 5 to 8 movements on your warm up, make it 5 to 8 minutes, and make sure that you're bringing in some intensity so that when you hit that first piece of your program, you're sweating already. You're already ready to go and hit that first set, whatever you're doing, with a little bit of enthusiasm and energy. So you can read some of the other things here. We don't really say cardio. Have you seen the person that says, you know what, I'm going to go lose weight and get in better condition? So they go to the treadmill for 40 minutes at 4 miles an hour at 2% incline, and they do that for 6 or 8 months, and they can't figure out why their body hasn't changed. So we'll focus a lot on short, fast, stamina-based movements, and we always vary speed and time. So last night I was running out to dinner. I had 20 minutes. I was out at my air assault. It was after a 3 to 5 minute warm up. It was a hard air assault session, 30 seconds on, 60 seconds off, 10 sets, and I was good to go after that. So those little things need to be considered when you're focusing on programming. So we're almost 30 minutes in. We've got a few more to go, and then we're going to tie this up and maybe get some questions. Again, with programming, weekly is the key. And if you go into a session and you don't know what you're doing, then write it down. Sounds silly, right? If you don't know what you're doing, write it down. That's why a lot of people are following programming now. There's a lot of people, there's trainers and coaches making more revenue virtually programming and training people than there are trainers in the gyms. A good trainer will actually program for somebody on a weekly basis when they don't see them. Right? In 15, 20, 25 years ago, trainers didn't have to do that. You could see somebody 2 hours or 3 hours a week. They'd keep coming back, and everybody would say, "Oh, it's because people want to be held accountable," and that's not the case anymore. People actually want, and the consumer is more educated, by the way. They actually want to know that you know how to program. The good news is, if you program really, really well, that will set you apart and keep people coming back. So weekly for sure. And then how do you track that? It could be as simple as a notebook. It could be as simple as your phone, but we like to see consistency being tracked. So a lot of people will only track either heart rate or load factor, meaning how much somebody's lifting during a given session or the week, which you should be doing that. But we actually like to see consistency. So if you have a simple application, I use MyZone, for example. Um, MyZone's great because it's simple, right? I don't like to complicate things, but I can look at my MyZone, and not only do I see my variability of heart rate and my duration and all that sort of good stuff, but I hold myself accountable and go, you know what? Last month I got 23 sessions in or 22 sessions in. That means I missed almost a full week during the month. So what are you doing? Ask yourself to hold yourself accountable on that, right? The next thing is try triage mobility. So mobility is obviously a really important piece to any program. When we do live sessions, we talk a lot about mobility, but we say, look, triage it. Make sure you're only hitting the areas that you really need to mobilize. And one of the other things that we always say that appears to be controversial, but is not, is the less conditioned you are, the less you need to mobilize. So those of you out there, if you were to come train with me in my garage gym here and you're fairly fit, we may mobilize for 20 or 25 minutes before we get into the session. The fitter you are, the more you mobilize. You just have to know how to mobilize and what areas of your body to hit. And if you don't know that, and if you're programming correctly, you're probably going to be hitting the arches of your feet and your legs and your hips and your glutes more than anything else. So we can get into that at a later seminar. I've done several seminars with Functional Aging Institute just on that. And then scheduling with life rhythm is really important. Again, wouldn't it be great if we could all train 2 times a day and get a massage and take a little nap and do all that? But if you guys have figured that part out, let me know, because I'd like to figure that out too. You need to make sure that you can do what you need to do in the course of a week. Um, a lot of trainers make the mistake of bringing clients in and trying to do an assessment on them. I don't like the word assessment. I think anybody that walks into a facility knows if they're deconditioned or they're overweight. I think what they want to know from your perspective as a trainer or coach to program them is, are you taking into consideration who they are? How much do they sleep, their experience in fitness, their evaluation of their own strengths and weaknesses? Those are the things that we always interview with. How many hours a night do they sleep? A snapshot of nutrition. We make it more of an interview process. It doesn't really matter to me what your body fat composition is when you walk in. That can also be intimidating for a lot of people. We will measure those things, but we generally try to wait until after we get to know the person as a human being so we actually understand their life rhythm. And with that approach, I will tell you that I think it's imperative. And again, if it's selfish time for you on this seminar, how you're training yourself or somebody else, but your life rhythm is really important. Uh, Training and exercise and longevity and getting more functional as you age is not just training anymore. It's not just about training. It's your nutrition, it's training, it's recovery, and then what I would call life rhythm, right? When we do these very large seminars for people, and we talk about this. We talk about this approach. In this four quadrant approach of nutrition, training, recovery, and life is also just about how you carry yourself through the day, right? I tell my staff a lot of the time, if you're a different person when you're standing in line at Starbucks than you are when you come home or you are when that's not the case. Like, train hard and strong and heavy enough and fast enough, and you'll find that you just deal with things better throughout the day. And obviously, the last thing I will say here is that recovery is critical, but I think it's another area that's a little bit misunderstood. It's one of the fastest growing trends in fitness currently, right? In fitness right now, everybody's talking cold plunge and sauna and compression. Well, those things are great, but they may not move the needle significantly enough. And some of those are difficult to access on a regular basis, right? If you're traveling or maybe your gym doesn't have them or you don't want to spend several $1,000s to get it at home. But what else can you do? So what are you doing throughout the day? That's why recovery is 24 hours. So it's the moment you're done training, what are you doing to get ready for the next session? It's what are you eating? What are you drinking? Are you standing too much? Are you seated too much? How are you dealing with things throughout the day? The temperature of your body, stress levels. So these are all the things that I think you should, if you're talking to a good coach or a good trainer, they should get to know you, and that point of recovery is critical. So yes, cold plunge, we're seeing a lot of conflicting evidence on that right now. Everybody's asking us about cold plunge and sauna, and most of my answer to that is we don't have enough really good information or data and science. Let's focus on what we know we can take care of in our programming, which is squat, press, deadlift, lifting heavy enough, making sure we're lifting fast, changing up our intensities on our stamina work, being careful that we're not doing too many fluffy exercises that really don't move the needle as far as getting your hormones in balance, getting you some lean mass, making you look more lean, right? That's a big reason people actually train. In fact, it's probably the number one reason people exercise is to actually look sexier and look better, right? I happen to think that's great, but I also think, and I know that most of our population that's looking for programming and really good trainers is over the age of 40 or 40, 45 with expendable income. So again, we do all day seminars on this stuff, but I wanted to just take about 35 minutes there and open this up and see if there's any questions out there. There is my email. If any of you would like to send me an email or you want some more specific help with anything, more than happy to do that. All right, Josh, I'm trying to get to some questions here. All right, Susan. So you said you're not sure if I said max effort 1 day a week or once a month. Please clarify. Yeah, thank you for that. It depends on who you are. But if I were looking at monostructural movements that are the most important, squat, press, and deadlift, you'd probably be doing that about once a month. Keep in mind as people start to ramp up, when they start to go heavy and they start to actually experience what it's like to go heavy, pretty challenging, right? So some people, it's going to make them feel like they're actually lifting heavier than they actually are. And it may take people a couple of months to really get down into understanding what that was. So um, Larry made a comment about Louis Simmons. He was with Louis for over 40 years. And yeah, that's great. You said they allow for training for power safety as well as heavy eccentric. Why do you put them down as a questionable choice? Um, Not questionable. I should clarify that, right? There's a lot of things that a lot of other approaches do. I tend to bias myself towards Louis and conjugate because that's where I've seen as a coach and a trainer the most success. I think a lot of the other programs have taken a little bit um, from what Louis, Louis to me, if it wasn't for Louis, we may not have the word programming out there. I think he was really good. Now, all that being said, um, the safety of what people do, you got to be really careful with some of the other programs. That's why I'm careful to say too much to a fitness audience. I might speak a little bit differently if I'm talking to a bunch of strength and conditioning coaches. There's a lot of good programs. Mark Ripito is brilliant. Windler has a great program. Hatch is out there. I mean, there's a lot of different programs. But Louis is one of the few books that I still have. And you said something about bands in your comment. Yes, absolutely. We didn't have the time to dive into that, Larry, but amazing point, right? As you get more, as your skill and your technique improve, we would have a sidebar conversation. I'd say, okay, now it's time to mix in some chains, some bands, some deficit lifting, some rack pulling, right? But that's, hopefully we'll get a chance to revisit all of that as we move forward. But really good point. Thank you for that. So, and again, last thing I'll say is for those of you that are coaching or training people, change your paradigm, change your thinking. If you're a trainer, trainers train horses, coaches coach people. It used to be where 2 or 3 hours in a 168-hour week might make a difference in somebody's life, not as much anymore. A really good coach takes in the totality of the full 168 hours during a week and helps interview, helps, you got to be very sincere and authentic when you're coaching people, right? You have to know who they are in everyday life, not just what they do or what they feel like when they come in the gym. So okay. I know we're right on the heel of our time. Y'all have my email. Feel free to hit me. Josh, if there's anything else, please let me know.
I think you did great. No, appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Doug, you got to the Q&A and everything too, right?
Let's see.
Looks like there's
Yes.
a question from Larry in the Q&A, and then there's a couple in the chat
Let me
from
see here.
Eric.
Let me see. Okay. Should I answer those?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Um, Eric asked, I'm a new trainer. Where's the best place to learn about building speed into programming? Well, hopefully the last 40 minutes help you. The conjugate method, as I had mentioned just a few moments ago, is a really good start. Here's what I'm also going to say. You can't coach what you haven't done. So I'm never going to stop learning. I'm never going to stop training. I'm never going to stop trying to get faster and stronger. I think a lot of it is going out there and learning how to do it. Now, all that being said, your skill and your technique, how you orient your body, your positioning. We do long seminars, full day seminars. We actually do all the education for the New York Sports Club. I think we've certified over almost 500 of their trainers. And the first thing we talk about in the first day of 8 hours, most of it's skill and technique. We actually open up the seminar and I say, well, how many of you have been to a physics class before? And that's what we start talking about. So yeah, I would say the Louis Simmons conjugate base method. Again, Mark Ripito starting strength is another, really good book that's been around a long time. There's The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, which is more of an academic book. Um, that I referenced. I got my graduate work done at Concordia University, and that's one of the books that I kept around still on my desk. It's a big old thick book, but a really good book. But Eric, yeah, you just got to get out there and start doing it, but make sure you learn how to move really, really well. So you're not at 100% of your 75%.
Doug, looked like there's two in the Q&A as well. Susan asked, looking at my notes, I'm not sure if you said a max effort day once a week or once a month. Please clarify. Thanks.
Yeah, I answered that live. Should I type the answer in too?
No, no, no. I think you're good if you did.
Okay, yeah, I hit Susan and Larry both.
Great. Yeah. So no, I think you're all set.
All right, Josh. Well, it was good connecting with you too. I'm so excited.
Likewise.
I'm so excited you're doing well.
Thank you. You as well. And everyone, thank you so much for attending. We appreciate it. Doug, thanks for all your expertise.
All right, we'll talk to you soon, Josh.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.